The Chargers have officially cut their roster down to 53 players after Tuesday's deadline, and there was one surprise player that neither one of us had in our final predictions.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers together now for over 6 seasons, but it's our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from. You're going to want to make sure you do that, because on the next show that we put out, we're going to be interviewing Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, working with the Chargers as their color commentator on the radio. Super excited about that, but also super excited to talk about the Chargers' initial 53-man roster, because things can change, right? And we have seen that in the next few days. Some guys at the end of the roster aren't safe, but David, Deane Leonard ended up making the team, somebody that neither one of us had, both of us very close. He had 51 out of 53, I had 52 out of 53, but none of us thought with what we saw from Deane Leonard when he got hurt that he was going to make the team. And on the other side of that, we kind of assumed Mark Webb was, just because at least you'd seen him play in some games, right? Very limited action, but he'd been with the team a little bit longer, had some versatility. He did not make the team, and Brandon Staley told us exactly why he didn't make the team. And Staley also talked about why the Chargers felt so comfortable keeping only 3 edge rushers. But the roster is obviously not perfect. So at the end of the show, we're going to be getting into some waiver wire targets for the Chargers, guys who could make some sense at some positions that might be a little light or a little inexperienced, because there are a couple of those, David, where the Chargers could definitely target them. We'll talk about which, of those positions those will be. But today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. David, there was one surprise. There's always a surprise. And maybe it shouldn't have been as much of a surprise, right? The Chargers drafted Deane Leonard this year, and he ends up making the roster, which is crazy because of how his season started, right? His preseason especially. Made some plays early on in training camp, had just about the worst first preseason game of anyone that I can remember, right? At least statistically, and all the bad things that happened to him. He ends up making the team, and maybe, makes more sense just to have those 6 cornerbacks that end up making the roster. Ja'Sir Taylor, the 6th-round rookie, also makes it. But he's definitely, I think, the surprise. Obviously, the one guy neither of us saw coming.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised when I saw that Deane Leonard made the initial 53-man roster here for the Chargers, because this is a guy that, you saw some tools. You saw some speed for sure. This was a guy that could definitely motor up and down the football field. And it seemed like coverage-wise, like he was at least in decent position a lot of the times, but there was one reoccurring theme that was very frustrating with Deane Leonard, and it was the inability to turn his head around. He just, that caused some penalties for him, and that's something that we've seen a lot of young corners kind of deal with, having to transition to really going, to look for the football. If you don't do that, you're going to get called for penalties a lot. We also saw, a couple of things with tackling and also some issues on special teams as well. But, hey, the Chargers keep all 8 of their 2022 draft picks, and, of course, that includes their 7th-round pick, Deane Leonard.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I remember us thinking, especially when Tavon Campbell was CB5, right? When he got waived, it definitely opened the door for both of these guys to make it, because it's like, okay, well, now, the door is wide open. This competition is wide open. And we were thinking, hey, it has to be one of these 2 guys, right? There's no way both these dudes can make it. Things change quickly, David, and both of these guys end up there. And obviously a lot of inexperience, right? It's a little scary that you're, CB5 in this sense, right? And CB6 are both guys that don't have any NFL playing experience, obviously. But you feel good about the top 4 guys. It is interesting, though, if this has anything to do with J.C. Jackson when he's coming back, right? Keeping that extra corner. They did keep 6 corners last year, so, that number isn't all that strange. But for Deane Leonard, right? 60-yard touchdown given up. He's tackled by J.T. Woods off of the guy in a freak play. He has a pass interference penalty. He ends up, giving up another touchdown in the red zone, or also, interferes with a punt returner. hits him right before the ball gets to him, gets a 15-yard penalty. Like anything that could go wrong did go wrong for Deane Leonard. But it was funny, though, because, when he was talking about it, the one thing he said is Dean Leonard is really, really, really fast. Brandon Staley said that about him. And obviously he has some plus tools, David, but like we talked about before, this is the initial 53-man roster, right? So he's going to have to probably wait a few days before he can really feel good about it. We'll see if the Chargers try to attack maybe a cornerback position, maybe a little bit more experience in the next few days.
Yeah, I definitely would not feel very comfortable if I was Dean Leonard at this moment in time, just because I do feel like he was probably one of the last guys that the Chargers were going to say, okay,
Sure.
This guy is going to be the one that makes my 53-man roster. He's, was one of those back of the roster and, back end of the roster type of guys. So, and also, like we said, there was a couple of issues that he had in the preseason, but hey, you make mistakes. That's the time to do it. That's the time to learn. Hopefully he takes those opportunities to try to improve upon all of those things, because, hey, that's where we learn the most. We learn the most in the most uncomfortable situations. He was put in a lot of those uncomfortable situations in the preseason. Hopefully we see a improved version of Dean Leonard when the regular season begins.
There's a lot of stuff to like. And I mean, he definitely has the tools to be a really good special team player. He has plus attributes. He's big for his position, right? He's fast for his position. That's always going to get coaches' attentions, obviously. Sure. Mark Webb, though, David, is the guy on the flip side of that, right, that ends up not making the team. Guy that both of us had making it. And we didn't feel super confident, right? We were kind of going back and forth. Is it Kemon Hall? Is it Mark Webb? Is it Dean Leonard? They're all hurt. How do you make this decision, right? Which is why it was kind of tough when we were doing it yesterday. But Mark Webb, I mean, Brandon Staley put it pretty simply, David, why he didn't end up making the roster.
He sure did. And it's all about availability. And I've said it many, many times. If you've listened to this podcast, availability is one of the best abilities. If you can't get on the football field, then you can't help the team. It doesn't matter, what traits and what skills that you have. If you can't use those traits and skills on the field when it actually counts. And that's why, it's not that much of a surprise for Mark Webb not to make this 53-man roster. However, Brandon Staley did say that the Chargers wanted to continue to work with Mark Webb. So that strongly indicates that they want to bring Mark Webb back to be a member of the practice squad. We know that Brandon Staley has spoken glowingly about Mark Webb in the past and what he's able to do. And there was a role for him last year when he was still dealing with injuries. So that's unfortunately been the theme of his young career so far, is just suffering from injury after injury. Hopefully, he can get himself right, start from the practice squad, and hey, injuries happen in the NFL. So he's going to have to stay ready, and hopefully he gets his opportunity to show what he can do, because this is a guy I've been wanting to see on the field for a long time. It just have not materialized, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's another dude who's pretty big for his position, right? Definitely filled that like star money role that they like a lot, having that kind of oversized DB on the field who covers better than a linebacker, right? Yeah. Runs faster than a linebacker, but can be physical enough near the line of scrimmage. He was a solid tackler, when we saw him last. But when was that? Middle of last season. Only played in a few games last season. Didn't play in a single preseason game this year to get any kind of indication of, how much progress he's made. And Staley said that before the cuts. He was like, hey, this is a really important time for a dude like that who's growing in this league. This is the time where he gets better. And he's not out in the field. And he was a 7th round pick last year, right? So it's not as if he was always super secure. You add in the fact the Chargers bring in another safety this year in JT Woods. He was a 3rd round pick there. And just Mark, Webb not being able to be on the field ends up being the final thing that ends up getting him released from the team. I don't think we've seen the last of him, though. We know the Chargers are really intrigued by him.
Yeah.
And we also know, hey, what did he put out there on tape that's going to have another team,
nothing.
Swooping him up quickly on the waiver wire. Luckily and hopefully, that all comes as a Charger. And, maybe that is a diamond, that can come out later on, because the depth does seem a lot better on this team. But one area that has pretty sketchy depth at this point, depending on what you think of Kyle Van Noy, is the edge rushing group. But Brandon Staley did come out and say, hey, this is exactly why we feel good about only having 3 edge rushers. And David, a moment to celebrate as Braden Fehoko, I think one of the hearts and souls of this team energy-wise, ends up making the roster, and talked about, how much that meant to him. So we are going to get into that because, just too cool of a story not to get into for sure. But I do need to tell you guys about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is something, I think most of us use. I have it. Use it all the time. But of LinkedIn Jobs, you have a new tool that you can use, and you can get your small business firing on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then you can add your job with the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so you can help find the help that you need and you can find the right people to hire. Because when you're hiring, it's all about finding the right people, and with the simple tools like screening questions, making it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. Right now, LinkedIn Jobs can help you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to tell you guys about my favorite daily fantasy app, and that, of course, is Prize Picks, and football season is here, baby. Daddy's ready to go. And I'll tell you right now, a couple of the entries that I have so far I really like a lot. 2 wide receiver entries for sure. Mike Williams, more than 6.5 touchdowns, and Keenan Allen, less than 6.5 touchdowns. Said before, Keenan Allen's, 6 is his sweet spot. He's only gone over, I think, once or twice, right? But he's gotten 6 more than he's ever gotten anything else in his career. And Mike Williams, the guy who scored double-digit touchdowns before through the air. I mean, I feel pretty good about that one. But what I love about Prize Picks is that it's just me versus the projections. I'm not going up against other people. I'm just picking 2 to 5 players, and if they go score more or less than their Prize Pick projections, I win. And not only do I win, I can win up to 10 times my money on any entry. Prize Picks offers projections on all of your favorite sports: MLB, NHL, NBA, NFL, most importantly, college football, golf, even MMA. You can find whatever you're looking for there, and there's a bunch of fun games. It is a lot of fun. I love Prize Picks. And make sure you guys download the Prize Picks apps or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, guys, at sign up for that instant deposit match up to $100. All right, David. Well, we talked about, really the biggest surprise. I mean, I only missed one guy, so, I mean, there's not that many surprises now. There's a lot I think we learned about this roster with how we made it, and I think we kind of learned it through the offseason, which is what made, I think, a lot of people get pretty close on their roster predictions, right? And it gives you, I think, a sense of how they're feeling about certain positions. And I also think how the versatility on this team is really helping them and maybe keeping less guys at certain positions, right? I do think, at tight end, you only keep 3 tight ends. We'll talk about that next. But you have a fullback, right? And Xander Horvath that can do some things, can get out there and catch the ball a little bit. They were having Gabe Neighbors practice over there who didn't end up making there for the last couple of weeks. But the edge position, David, is one when you're just looking at straight up numbers. You see 3 edge rushers. That's kind of going to set off some alarm bells, right? That's going to kind of put up some red flags. But a lot of it has to do with the ambiguity of Kyle Van Noy, right? The Chargers kept technically 6 linebackers, only 3 edge rushers: Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, and Chris Rumph. But Brandon Staley put it pretty simply, David. He said, we're not really planning for Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack not to be on the field very much.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, when he was talking about it, he said, hey, when you have these premier edge rushers, they play 80% of the time, and it's mostly, most of the time it's closer to 90% of the time. So they expect Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack to be on the field a lot and playing a lot of football for them this year. And hey, who wouldn't want Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa on the field as much as possible, as long as they are healthy and do their thing? But also, I think what you saw out of Chris Rumph this offseason was very, very encouraging.
That's a great call.
He just looks like a completely different player. He's put on some very good weight. Looks like he has also added some hand usage moves that have been very impressive as a pass rusher and as a run stopper. He's a guy that's not a liability in the running game anymore. So I feel like his emergence is definitely one thing that makes you feel more comfortable about that group. And also Kyle Van Noy, we know that he has played edge in this league, had success doing that. So that's another guy. And then he also kind of alluded that, hey, we can take guys from other position groups and put them on the edge, like Fox, Morgan Fox. That they asked him, hey, can you put Morgan Fox on the outside? And Brandon Staley says, Foxy can do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Foxy can do anything. I mean, as long as taking guys from other positions doesn't mean, trying Kenneth Murray back there again, trying Jerry Tillery out there again, I'm totally cool with it. I mean, I think that does make you feel a little bit better about the depth, that you can put some guys out there in case of emergency, and you do have a guy you feel pretty good about in Chris Rumph. And I do still think that they brought Kyle Van Noy in to shore up that spot. I don't think they, imagined all the injuries that they were going to have at linebacker when this was all going on, right? So I don't think it was as clear cut then. I think it was mostly, hey, you're going to be mostly edge and then some linebacker. But if he's telling you, right, that Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, if they're out there, are going to play 80 to 90% of the snaps, Kyle Van Noy probably wants to be on the field more than, 20 or 10% of the time. So yeah. I think that using him in that way is going to be good. And I think that, yeah, if one of those dudes were to go down for, a couple of weeks, were to go down for an extended period of time, he could step in. Kyle Van Noy, could step in and be kind of that full-time edge rusher if you need to. And if really, the combination of Chris Rumph and Kyle Van Noy kind of manning whatever one of those guys potentially goes out, I think makes you feel okay about that group.
Let's not forget about Derwin James too, and his ability to rush the passer. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, but he's not really lining up at edge rusher too often. Not enough to count in this category. But one position group I do feel good about, right, is the defensive tackle unit. And I think you see that this year when a guy like Christian Covington, who's brought back and started games for you in 2021, gets released. I think that shows you the depth on this team right now. Jerry Tillery has gotten pushed way down from his, universal starting spot that he had going into the season last year. But Braden Fehoko at the end of it comes in, claims his roster spot, and it's just nice to see that kind of play rewarded. I know Michael Bandy doesn't end up making the roster, and that's upsetting for a lot of people. Just didn't make a lot of sense, and Brandon Staley said as much. For the Chargers, keeping someone like Braden Fehoko made a ton of sense, David, and it was so cool getting to see him do his press conference after, really accomplishing his lifelong dream. Even last year, he did not make the initial 53-man roster. This is a guy who's gotten cut twice and made the improvements from when he started to get to a place now where he's on the team.
Well, it's just a true story of resilience, right? This is a guy that has been at the back end of rosters his entire NFL career.
In his words, yeah.
Ever since he tried to get into the NFL. And so you see him, do everything he possibly can to make a team, and he gets cut. He gets cut again. And he still comes back for more, and he improves upon his game, and he goes out there and he balls out in the preseason, and he earns his role on this team. So you got to feel good about that, and also just be motivated by that. He did not quit. He didn't give up, and here he is. He's on the 53-man roster, and it's got to feel good.
And he absolutely deserved it. And everyone pardon David. He's getting a little emotional there, getting a little choked up. Right, had to clear the throat. No, but it's cool, man. He was the guy you're pulling for, right? He is that glue guy. You can tell how much his teammates care for him. In the words of Brandon Staley, right? He gave this compliment to Michael Bandy. He gave this compliment to Braden Fehoko. He thinks those are his type of players. He thinks those are Chargers, right? Those guys are Chargers. That's what he said, right? And it's cool that means something, right? That is something you can kind of prop up, or that is used as a compliment to someone like, hey, he fits in this new and improved culture. And he absolutely does. And he brings a level of physicality, with the front that they've added to with Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson, where I think that truly could be a strength on the interior this year. We have to see it, right? It's coming from a very low spot, right? So, when you're starting at 29 or whatever it is, and you're trying to, improve from that, it's going to have to take big strides. But I definitely think Braden Fehoko is part of the solution there, right? And part of, getting stronger and getting more physical on the inside. But doesn't mean that the Chargers should be done, David, or content with where the roster is at right now. Because one of the great things about this time of year is, not only, do the Chargers have to make tough, cuts, a lot of other teams have to make a lot of really tough decisions on some very, very capable players. And some of those very capable players happen to play positions the Chargers could really add to. A couple of positions like tight end and running back, that there are some big question marks out right now, and maybe even an offensive tackle out there that would make sense for the Chargers to go pick up. So we're going to get into some of the waiver wire targets after we've seen the initial round of cuts around the NFL coming up right after this. But I do need to tell you guys about something that has saved me a bunch of times, and that is the Dave app, right? Something that when you're in a pinch, you can get a little bit of extra cash with the extra cash rewards on the Dave app to get some money to pay extra bills that you didn't necessarily think about. If you have a wedding gift that you didn't think about, and now you're a little short on cash, this is something where you can use it and you're going to save yourself. Think of it as a little thank you from future you, right? And something, a little help. We all need a little help every once in a while. And with the Dave app, that is something that they specialize in doing. It's the banking app that can get you up to $500 instantly with extra cash, more money to fill your tank, to tackle those expenses. And the great thing is there's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand. Download the Dave app right now, guys, from the App Store. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. All right, David. Well, one of the things that we talked about getting into yesterday, right? We talked about what positions that the Chargers could potentially try to target yesterday. And now I think we have, some faces to the names, I guess, kind of a situation going on here where now we actually see some guys who are out there.
Now we know who's available. Yeah,
totally. And one of the things that, even though the Chargers didn't officially name their right tackle, Brandon Staley surprised everybody at the press conference. He said, hey, I've been keeping it under wraps, and I know that, Trey Pipkins has gotten all the starting reps at right tackle over the last 2 weeks and played, the entire game and whatever. The official starting right tackle is Trey Pipkins, and it's still a risk, right? Whether it was Storm Norton or Trey Pipkins, it was always a risk.
Yeah.
Now we know that Storm Norton is the backup. He is the swing tackle. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't upgrade at that position, David. And you brought up somebody that could make a lot of sense for the Chargers to go out there and target.
Yeah, this is the guy that we've talked about several times because obviously the right tackle position.
It seems like it's like, hey, this is a guy. Maybe go do it, then never do it.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking about Dennis Kelly here. A mountain of a man, 6'8", 320 plus pounds. He's absolutely gigantic. But yeah, he's been a really solid right tackle pretty much his entire career. Last year, 305 snaps, 185 pass block snaps, only 1 sack given up and only 4 pressures. And yeah, he played in a run heavy type of offense there, but going back to 2020, he played pretty much the entire year, 1,049 snaps there, 0 sacks given up. So this guy is very steady, very solid. And the Chargers, it feels like if they wanted to get him, they could have got him a couple of different times here, but he's available again, and he still looks like he could be an upgrade.
Yeah, we've never heard any interest, right? The right tackle position for the Chargers has been an issue now. We're talking Sam Tevy years. We're talking, last year's Storm. It's been a while since it was an issue. You had the Joe Barksdale kind of debacle there, right? Yeah. A lot has gone into that in the search for the right tackle, and we're not sure that it's over yet. But one thing with Dennis Kelly, you just named it right there for those keeping track at home. They're not all pass blocking snaps, obviously, but the last, 1,400 snaps or thereabout, the dude's given up 1 sack, right? So that's hard to fake in that sense. I do think one thing is a lot of run-heavy offenses he was going with, right? A lot of time with the Titans, most of his career with the Titans, and this year trying to get on with the Colts, but did have a really promising, had promising time with the Green Bay Packers as well, where he was playing in a less run-heavy offense, and he did get to show what he can do in pass blocking situations. Just a solid dude, a totally solid dude. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. I think the Chargers feel good with Storm Norton, whether they should or not. And I guess the one argument for Storm Norton, and we were kind of talking about it before the show, is like, hey, even with as bad as it was last year, there were some good games mixed in. There was games where he looked like he was the guy, but the times he was bad, it was really bad. But now, not many teams can say they have a backup right tackle that has almost a full year of NFL experience starting at right tackle, right? So at least there is some, consolation there. But getting a guy like Dennis Kelly, I think, would make you feel a lot better, because then if the Trey Pipkins experiment doesn't work out, now you have another option, right? A different guy you can throw in there and see if that could potentially be the answer. But there's more waiver wire targets the Chargers could potentially go after, including tight end, David, which is somewhere they only have 3 tight ends right now. Donald Parham is still a little bit banged up, and Brandon Staley wouldn't, confirm that he's going to come back for week 1 against the Raiders. So when you're looking at some of the tight ends that got cut, who is one that stood out to you?
Yeah, a guy that's, really big, really athletic is O.J. Howard, a guy that played for the Tampa Bay Bucks for a couple of years. His first 3 seasons in the league, he had 25-plus receptions, 400-plus yards in each of those first 3 seasons. Now, the last 2 seasons have definitely been down years, only 11 and 14 receptions, respectively. So, you never want to get players that are on a downward trajectory, but I still feel like O.J. Howard is young enough to where he could potentially see some kind of resurgence.
Yeah, and you brought up Jay Sternberger as well, who did have some ties with the Chargers because their tight end coach did have him when they were in Green Bay together. Both of them are kind of lukewarm to me. Obviously, what are they bringing him in to be kind of your 4th tight end? The biggest thing with O.J. Howard is, like, the Bills don't have a lot of great tight end options, right? And he didn't make that team this year. And they had some guaranteed money in it, money that they're not going to get back, and they were still comfortable with releasing
letting him go. Yeah.
That is a loaded roster. But the part of the injuries and the decline, I think that scares me the most is the torn Achilles in 2020, right? That's just such a tough injury to come back from. It's definitely something that can sap some of your athleticism for sure. Definitely. I'm not saying, I don't watch every one of his plays or anything, but I have watched him. Doesn't look like anything special, at least last season. I mean, a very down year. That one's tough. I mean, because I think with a player like that, I remember when he was coming out, like the big thing about with him was the dude's a freak athlete. But when your game is based on your athleticism and then you have something like that happen to you, it can definitely take you a while, right, to kind of reshape and reform your game. And I just don't know if he's there yet or if he'd be worth, coming in as a tight end for it. Not a terrible lottery ticket, right, to pull if it is tight end for. I just don't necessarily see it happening. But let's go to running back, David, because I think there is one position, right? I mean, first of all, let's say the running back situation happened exactly as we thought it would on the depth chart. They did end up keeping Larry Roundtree. So 4 guys they kept: Eckler, Josh Kelly, and then you have Isaiah Spiller, who's still banged up, and Larry Roundtree. But ton of veterans, David, on the market with experience that you could put behind Austin Eckler, because, Josh Kelly's played a lot, hasn't really had a ton of success. Larry Roundtree had very minimal playing time last year in his rookie season. Isaiah Spiller has 0, and all of that's behind Austin Eckler. There are some guys out there, David. A lot of names, right? We talked about Sony Michel, but besides Sony Michel, guys like Marlon Mack, right, has now been released. Kenyon Drake gets released by the Raiders after that really dumb contract. Family trust respect. Justin Jackson, a familiar name, is back on the market after getting cut by the Detroit Lions. Any of those guys do anything for you there, David? Any of those kind of veterans you'd think about kicking the tires on to try to, maybe, I think, complement this running back room?
Yeah, hey, the contract be damned. Hey, good for him and good for his agent, but Kenyon Drake's been a productive player in this league.
I wouldn't want him for what they signed him for, but he got his money.
And thankfully you're not going to have to worry about that because the Raiders have to deal with that. But hey, if you're getting Kenyon Drake for league minimum, for a vet minimum, then absolutely. 6 of 7 seasons, averaging 4 yards per carry or over. In 2019, he scored 8 touchdowns. In 2020, he scored 10 touchdowns. So, like I said, this is a guy who has had success in this league. That benchmark for running backs is 4 yards a carry. This guy has done that repeatedly in his NFL career. I feel like he would be a good complement, a guy that can be a good runner and has showed some soft hands as a pass catcher as well.
And I think, as David said yesterday, right, if you're worried about him only having 4 yards per carry the last 2 years, look at what the backup running backs had last year behind Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson, right? It was far below 4.0. So
very bad.
You also have to kind of love the thought of having the Raiders pay you to have one of your running backs, right? I think that's something
absolutely.
Too. Marlon Mack, I think, too many injuries at this point.
Yeah, he's played 7 games in the last 2 seasons. That's just,
exactly. That one's tough. The game is definitely deteriorating a little bit. Another one where it's injuries, maybe it might have messed that up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Hard to say there. We were talking about Phillip Lindsay beforehand too, David. Probably not for the Chargers.
Yeah, definitely not for Phillip Lindsay. The one cool thing about Phillip is he's never fumbled in his entire NFL career.
That's a crazy stat.
Which is insane to me because he's not the biggest guy. He's never been the biggest guy. He has been a very feisty guy. I like the way he plays. I've respected him, playing, in
very
in
no
Denver.
Nonsense. Yeah.
Felt like he was the guy that definitely, he brought a lot of attitude. Yeah, definitely against the Chargers too, but also a guy that's coming off of a couple of down years. And unfortunately with running backs, the older you get, that 30, the age 30 threshold is very real. It's very tangible. We've seen way too many examples of why you just don't want to go with running backs in particular that are on that downward trend.
Yeah, after a certain age. We've talked about before, how we'd be at least somewhat in favor of reuniting with Justin Jackson, which still gives you you're basically trading out Isaiah Spiller for Larry Roundtree like you had last year, right? Same running back room, except for with the addition of Isaiah Spiller, which should still be an improvement. But you're also getting an upgraded Josh Kelly, right? We weren't feeling the way we were feeling about Josh Kelly last year as we are today. One last one I would float out there. I don't think it's likely, but if we're going to throw a defensive guy out there, Logan Ryan was a surprise cut from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the one thing is the Chargers obviously a little bit flimsy in the back end of their DB room, right? Not a ton of experience there. The other thing is it seems like Brandon Staley loves bringing in New England Patriot players or former New England Patriot players because the two of their bigger signings this year were one Kyle Van Noy and the biggest one, J.C. Jackson. So we know he likes those championship pedigree type of players. Logan Ryan would bring that. And he's also a guy that can do a little bit of stuff in the slot, right? He can do a little bit of star money stuff, and he plays some safety. So if you're talking about versatile, you're talking about a guy who's a true defensive back. He definitely kind of fills that role. I think he'll probably, at least from what I read about it, he's probably going to end up back with the Buccaneers potentially after they put a couple of guys on injured reserve. At the same time, David, I mean, that is a guy that it seems like he would be Brandon Staley's type. It seems like his type of guy. But that is we're already going long. And it's hard to not think about what we have coming up on the next show, David. Something we've been trying to get done for a long time. Daniel Jeremiah, a.k.a. Move the Sticks, a.k.a. the Chargers color guy for their radio broadcast with Matt Money Smith, is coming on the Locked On Chargers podcast. We had Matt Money Smith. We're completing it this week with Daniel Jeremiah, also works for the NFL Network. Not many more guys that I would want on as far as an X's and O football standpoint, former NFL scout. He should be on the show on Friday, guys. We're trying to get a big-time guest for you guys, and we're going to have a great conversation about him, the Chargers expectations, Justin Herbert, and all that. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and you can also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. If you want the alert of when that show goes live, follow all of our social media as well. You can find the show on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can find me on Twitter at DanTalkSports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalk. SD. You can always find the shows there. You'll always know when big guests come on the show and when the best banger shows are coming out. But thank you guys again for checking the show out. You can also check us out on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We're going to keep doing fan stuff, especially during the season, guys, getting your reactions to games and everything like that. If you want to get on that action, go call into 323-524-7924. We try to get all those Chargers voicemails played on the show. But that's going to do it for us today. The next time you see us, we'll be having a much more handsome, much more well-informed man on the show. Daniel Jeremiah, Move the Sticks, coming on Friday. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.